sergeant says I'm going to turn my back. When I turn around, whoever's standing forward is going to be the hero. The sergeant turns his back, turns right around, and sees Michael Coard standing forward. And he's commending me. He's congratulating me. What a great guy I am. But what he doesn't realize is this. I never stepped forward. The 9 cowards stepped back. So, from my standpoint, I'm not really doing anything special. I was fortunate enough to go to a great school, Masterman, then found out about Cheyney and came here to become a teacher, and then decided I wanted to be a lawyer instead of a teacher. And because I was at Cheyney, I got a chance to be in student government and be treated fairly, be on the dean's list, treated fairly, see black role models and be treated fairly, and get that foundation I need to get a full scholarship to law school at Ohio State University. And the only reason is Cheyney University. That's why I'm here today. And now let me get into specifically what I'm here to talk about. How much time do I have, Junior?
Take your time. We'll deal with it.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
Yeah, that's right. We like to talk.
So let me try to get in a good, say, 15, 20 minutes, then I'll answer any questions you all have. It goes like this. About a year and a half ago, as Junior's mentioned, Professor Sonny Harris, who was the president of the faculty union here at Cheyney University years ago, he reached out to us and said, we had done something back in 1980, 34 years ago, when we filed a lawsuit because of the racism and racial discrimination by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And Professor Sonny Harris said that not much of any real substance has happened since then. So he wanted to try to revive that. So he put us all together and we formed a group called Heeding Cheyney's Call. And we took Heeding Cheyney's Call from the alma mater, where it talks about whenever Cheyney needs something, we have to respond. So that's what we decided to do, to heed the call. And what we did was this. On September 23, 2013, we sent a letter to Governor Corbett, and we laid out all the problems, and we started out by saying this. This all-time great institution has an all-time low student enrollment and an all-time high budget deficit. Let me repeat that. This all-time great institution has an all-time low student enrollment and all-time high budget deficit. So why is that? The answer is racism. Now people would say that there have been some internal administrative problems here at Cheyney, and that might be true, but we have to keep our eye on the prize. It all comes down to who's responsible. For example, if you're in an accident on a SEPTA bus, you don't sue the SEPTA driver, you sue the SEPTA corporation. The driver is there because the company hired him, because the company allowed him to remain in that position. So whatever internal administrative problems we've had at Cheyney pale in comparison to what the state did to get us there. So we put out this mantra called parity through equity. Parity through equity. What does that mean? That means that we want to have parity with the 13 white institutions, but we're not just talking about equality. Because people think that, you know, equal rights is a good thing, and it certainly is. And we should seek to get equal funding and equal programs and equal whatever with those other schools. But that won't get it. And the reason why it won't get it is this. Let's say for the last 10 years, the state had given out pies to these 14 institutions. And they give the 13 white ones 99% of the pie, and Cheyney 1%. Year 10, and year 9, and year 8, so on and so forth. And now we get up to the last year, and Cheyney says, hey, what's going on? You got to give us more. For the last 9 years, you've given the white schools 99%, and you've given Cheyney 1%. So the state comes along and says, yeah, you're right. We're going to promote equality. So now we're going to give everybody an equal share. But equality is not enough under those circumstances. You have to go beyond equality toward equity. Equity means more than just half. It means putting us where we would have been had you not given the other state institutions the 99%. So we're not asking for 1% now, we're not asking for 10%, we're not asking for 50%. We're pretty much asking for 99.9% to balance the playing field, to level the playing field. And what's the basis of this? Well, I don't want to get too complicated because when lawyers talk, they use fancy legal jargon and nobody has any idea what they're talking about. But for me, I always say I'm not a lawyer who happens to be a black man. Instead, I'm a black man who just happens to be a lawyer. So for me, my whole focus is what's in the best interest of the university. And obviously, as a lawyer, I got to use the law, but it's much more than that. Speaking of the law, what we did when we formed this group, Heeding Cheyney's Call, we have the people that Junius introduced, but we have a steering committee, and the steering committee has what we call a negotiation team. And the negotiation team, that's the team of folks who go to Harrisburg and have been going to Harrisburg since January of this year to negotiate a confidential, off-the-record discussion. And because we agreed, when I say us, Heeding Cheyney's Call, negotiation team, and the other side, that consists of the Governor's Office of General Counsel, that's the governor's lawyers, the PASHE lawyers, Pennsylvania Association of State System of Higher Education, and the Budget Office. So lawyers from those three entities were on the other side, and on our side, we had our all-star team. Not only did we have Professor Sonny Harris, former faculty union president and Junius Stanton president of the Alumni Association, but we reached out to the leading expert in discrimination against institutions of higher learning, especially HBCUs, and that's none other than Dr. Earl Richardson. Dr. Earl Richardson was the president of Morgan State University for 26 years, and every time there's a lawsuit involving discrimination against black colleges all over the country, they called him in. I reached out to him, I met with him, and he's a great guy, and agreed to join our negotiation team. Now, we got the country's greatest expert on discrimination against black colleges on our team. But we didn't stop there. We reached out to a guy named Pace McConkey. And Pace McConkey is the attorney for the 4 Maryland schools that filed the lawsuit a few years back and just won in October 2013. He's the director of something called the Robert M. Bell Center for Civil Rights. So we got those 2 all-stars. And then we reached out, we said, okay, if we need to file a lawsuit, we need a local attorney who does that. Because I don't do this stuff. I'm just here talking to you because I understand how it works. But I'm actually a criminal defense attorney. I do homicides. I do murder cases. And so far, nobody here has killed anybody. But still, I know how the civil law works. I'm thinking, okay, we need an attorney who has an expertise in not only civil litigation, but federal civil litigation and federal civil litigation dealing with discrimination. Who can we get? So we went to the top of the list, and we want to work our way down. If we didn't get plan A, we go to B and C and D. So the first one we reached out to was a guy by the name of Joe Tucker. Joe Tucker is the founding partner of the largest and most prominent black law firm on the East Coast. It's called the Tucker Law Group. And he has a number of some of the greatest black lawyers who won multi-million-dollar verdicts as part of his team. In fact, they just hired Carl Singley. Carl Singley used to be the dean of Temple Law School. So that's an army of lawyers. We reached out to Joe Tucker and we said, we need help, and we know you're the guy. And Joe Tucker is a young black man, probably his late 40s or so, maybe a little older, and make a whole bunch of money and charges some major mega fees. We said, look, we're not coming to you with our hat in hand begging for you to do this free, but we don't really have money that you normally get from your clients. What can you do to help us? He said, whatever you need. And that to me is really important because here you got a big-time black lawyer who agreed to assist us and charge no fee. And I'm going, let's give Joe Tucker a round of applause for that. This kind of case from beginning to end with interrogatories and depositions and bringing in expert witnesses and putting them in hotels and all that stuff would be anywhere from $500,000 to $250,000. And he agreed because he said, hey, I know Cheyney, I got family members who connected with Cheyney, I'm black, you're black, you need help, we're willing to go. So we got this all-star team together, we met with the Governor's Office of General Counsel, the PASHE lawyers, and the Budget Office. And we agreed from the very beginning that all our conversations and negotiations would be off the record and confidential. And the reason we said that is we want everybody to be candid. We want everybody to know that they can say whatever they're thinking without somebody running to the media. So I can't tell you everything we said, but we agreed after the first meeting that we would say publicly that the meetings were productive and civil. Productive and civil and ongoing. Those things, productive, civil, and ongoing. And that was true up until maybe July of this year. Because one of the things we do, and there's really no need to reinvent the wheel, we looked at the Maryland case where the 4 black schools sued the state of Maryland several years ago and finally won on one of the key issues in October of 2013. And we looked at them, and of course we got Dr. Earl Richardson on our team and Tracy McConaughey. And one of the things they were able to do in their victory is to get the federal judge, Kathleen Blake, toward the end of the case, after she ruled in favor of the black schools, she got from Pace McConaughey, the lead attorney, something called a framework for remedies. A framework for remedies. And that was a kind of roadmap from the plaintiffs, the black colleges, to the state of Maryland as to where they should be moving toward a resolution, a framework for remedy. So we, heeding Cheyney's call, took that Maryland framework and adjusted it to apply specifically to Pennsylvania and to Cheyney. And we submitted that framework to those attorneys for the governor. And we asked for stuff like this, basically 7 things, and I'll get to all 7 later. But we asked one of the key things that you have to stay focused on here is that any federal civil rights litigation has to concern itself with anti-discrimination. If it's discriminatory, then it's illegal. But at the same time, Cheyney is a black institution historically and must maintain its identity. We want to be treated fairly and equally, and we want black students to be able to go to white schools like Westchester and other schools like that. And we're not slamming the door on white students and Asian students and others who want to come to Cheyney, but we must, as we put it in number 1 in our framework, Cheyney must maintain its historic institutional identity. And that's first and foremost. I came to it because it's a black school, and you all came because it's a black school. So we want it to be forever a black school. And one of the reasons why I say that, and I'm going to quickly go off to the side before I go back to the 7 points, one of the things that they did in the Maryland case, they didn't make money a priority. It's not like they came into their negotiations with the state of Maryland and said, we want X amount of dollars, if you give us that, then the case is over. It's much more than money. And I'm going to go to the stuff that's included. But money is a major part of it. So what we did, we looked at the Maryland case, and it's 4 schools. And those 4 schools included several things that they wanted from the lawsuit, and they included the funding. And they determined, based on the way that the state of Maryland treated those black schools over the past several decades, that they would need a total of $2.1 billion. $2.1 billion. So when reporters came to me and came to Junius and came to Sonny, when we had our press conference back in September of 2013, they were asking how much money do we want? And we don't want to fall into the game of saying X amount of dollars, but what I did say is this: let's do the math. If the 4 schools in Maryland figured that they needed a total of $2.1 billion, then half of that would be $1 billion, and half of that would be $500 million. So if each school deserves $500 million in Maryland for what happened to them, Cheyney is in a much worse situation. So if you're talking about writing us a check, start off with a 5 and a 0 and a 0 and 3 more zeros. Because from my standpoint, it's going to take that kind of money. $1 billion is not going to do it, $10 million is not going to do it, $15 million is not going to do it. If we're talking about getting this thing done right, then we're looking at Maryland. They're asking for the $500 million that they deserve per school, based on what had happened to them, and even beyond that. There's something called the 1999 Agreement. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the Office for Civil Rights, which is a federal agency, sat down to say, hey, what is the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania doing to Cheyney? Why is it treating Cheyney like this? You got to fix this, you got to fix that, you got to fix the other. Now remember, this is the federal government saying to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. In 1999, the federal government and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania came together and they signed an agreement, signed by the president's representative, signed by the governor's representative, and based on that 1999 agreement, we've done the math and figured that if they had done in 1999, 15 years ago, what they were supposed to do, then the value of that would have been about $100 million. So you're talking about $100 million from the breach of the 1999 agreement. We're talking about $500 million from what each school in Maryland is talking about. So again, anywhere between $100 million and $500 million would get us where we need to be. But I want to be clear, money is not the key issue here. Because you know what they say, a fool and his money is soon parted. So you put the wrong person in leadership and the state gives that money and it goes right out the window. So it's not just the money, this is what we're asking for. In the framework for remedy, we're asking for Cheyney to maintain its historic identity. We're asking for new and attractive programs. Not just new academic programs, but the type of programs that 15-year-old boys and girls aspire to as professionals. 19, 20-year-old college students aspire to as professionals. You know what they say, if you build it, they will come. So if you have the programs that students want, so that 5, 10, 15 years from now they can be in that profession, they'll come to Cheyney. So maintain institutional identity, make sure we get the academic programs. Also, and this is key, no program duplication. Don't give this great academic program to Cheyney and then next semester turn around and give it to Westchester. Because Westchester has much better facilities, so if a kid out of high school wants to go to a college to become a professional nurse, and there's Westchester here with the program, and Cheyney here with the same program, 9 times out of 10, they'll go to Westchester. I was shocked to find out that Westchester has more black students than Cheyney has students. Let me repeat that. Westchester has more black students than Cheyney has students. And at first I got mad with black people for sending their students to Westchester, but I understand it. I can see why a mother or father or grandmother, grandfather wants his or her son or daughter, whatever, to get the best education with the best facilities. So again, we're saying, give us attractive programs, don't duplicate those programs. In addition, we want a reform of PASHE policies. PASHE is the body, the entity that kind of governs what goes on statewide. And they got this thing called the funding formula. And the funding formula determines how much money each school gets based on their enrollment, based on how many students they keep, based on fundraising, all those factors. And those factors that determine how much money each school gets, those factors undermine what Cheyney's trying to do. Because think about it. What they're saying is they want Cheyney to run in this race, but they chop off Cheyney's legs before the race. And then say, okay, run. Well, yeah, you put everybody at the same starting line, but nobody knows what happened before those runners got to the starting line. And what happened is you cut off Cheyney's legs. The other thing we want to make sure we do is to have federal judicial monitoring and oversight. So when we get these academic programs, I want to be clear, not just the academic programs, not just the money, but the facilities, state-of-the-art equipment, security, professors, staff, all that stuff to make Cheyney what it once was. So this framework laid out those 7 points, and up until that, up until say around maybe April or May of this year, there was a little friction, a little tension between us and the Harrisburg attorneys, but we're still working together. And finally, sometime around July, we submitted this framework. Again, we took what the federal judge approved in Maryland, took that framework, applied it to Pennsylvania generally, and applied it to Cheyney specifically. And we said to the attorneys, hey, we've been having these really nice, cordial, professional conversations. Everybody's dealing with everybody above board, but now we got to be able to go back to Cheyney, go back to the Alumni Association, go back to the students and tell them what we produced, what we've gotten. They don't want to hear that we're just sitting down talking and being nice. We got to bring something back. So we laid out those 7 points on that framework and gave it to them. And they said they'd get back to us in a couple weeks. And a couple weeks turned into more than a couple weeks. And a couple weeks turned into a couple months. And finally we said, hey, we can't wait any longer. We need you all to respond. And they responded with some generic, broad, vague, non-responsive response. It was basically some lawyer wrote it where it's a whole bunch of words, but we didn't say anything. So what we said is, okay, we got this from you and we don't like it. We figured that you're playing us and we need to move forward. So if we don't get what we want from you in the next 48 hours, then we're going to take the next step. And every step that we've taken, just so you all know, we're not just doing it on a wing and a prayer. We're not just making this stuff up. Fortunately for us, we do have Dr. Earl Richardson, 26 years at Morgan State, and Pace McConkey, Center for Civil Rights, and Joe Tucker, one of the leading black civil rights law firms in the country. So they've done all this stuff. And by the way, Joe Tucker represents major universities and sues major universities, so he knows the inside and outside. So every step we've taken with the governor's legal staff has always been something that we thought about and we planned about. Nothing was just freestyle or improvised. It was all part of a system and a structure. A punch and a counter punch, another counter punch. So we knew what they were going to do. Finally, we told them about a week ago that we got 24, 40 hours to give us what we need, or we're going to take the next step. They intimated that they were going to take us much more seriously by producing something concrete, but really didn't. So we fired off a letter saying it's over, it's done, we're on our way to federal court. And I don't want to say too much, but I will say this, because a lot of stuff is confidential. We look at the calendar like they look at the calendar. We know what November 4 is. They know what November 4 is. So we're saying, okay, if we do something, it probably should be before November 4. And it probably should be about 7 to 10 days before November 4. Because if you're not going to help us, then we're not going to help you. Can you imagine a multi-million-dollar federal lawsuit against the governor of Pennsylvania in the middle of his re-election bid, and basing it on race? So now people who really didn't care about the election are hearing a week to 10 days before it that the governor's a racist and trying to destroy a black college. Now all of a sudden, you got, he's already down in the polls, but once this comes out, he's going to be even lower. So they know what we know about the calendar. It's like the elephant in the room. Nobody ever talked about it, but we all knew what was going on. And they knew that at this time, last week, we were going to finally get to the point of saying, we got to get this thing resolved. So we sent them this final letter saying, we really don't have any more time for these slow walk negotiations and not doing anything. So we're on our way to federal court, and we're going to hold a major press conference. We didn't even tell them that when we're going to do this. We know it's going to be 7 to 10 days before the election, but we didn't tell them exactly when. Once they saw that we're on our way to court, we basically said, look, if you want to talk to us, you can, but talk to us while we're walking. We're walking to the courthouse, and if you want to kind of grab us by the arm and turn us around, we'll listen to you, but we're walking to the courthouse. So they responded immediately. I sent a text, actually, for one of the attorneys who represents the group, 9:37 p.m. last Wednesday or Tuesday. And beginning at 8 a.m. the next morning, he's calling me, he's texting me, he's emailing. And it's like, the girlfriend and the boyfriend are playing hard to get. I didn't return his calls, so I don't know if this is being recorded. Yeah, I did return his calls immediately. But we didn't connect immediately. Bottom line is, he said, look, I understand you guys are on your way to the courthouse and you got to do what you got to do. But surprisingly, he said, what can we do? What's the top 4, exact words, what's the top 4 or 5 things we can do to try to resolve this? The top 4 or 5 things we can do to try to resolve this. And I'm like, well, pick any 4 or 5 of the 7 on our framework. And whatever you pick from that, we're willing to listen. We're not going to stop what we're doing, but at least we're going to listen to you. So right now, they're in panic mode. They don't know the date that we're going to file it, but we are. They don't know the date we're going to hold the press conference, but we are. It comes down to this, I said at the outset, this all-time great institution has an all-time low student enrollment and has an all-time high budget deficit. And you can't blame a certain former president or certain former presidents for that. Because even if you want to blame them, there's something in law called agency. And agency means that you don't go after the employee, you go after the employer. Going back to the example about the SEPTA bus driver. If you're the SEPTA corporation and you know this bus driver had 1 accident last week, and 2 accidents last month, and 3 rear-enders the month before that, at a certain point, you as the employer got to get rid of that bus driver. And if you don't, it's your fault, because that bus driver is an agent of you. So even if some of the administrations of Cheyney have been less than competent, that's not the issue, because the boss, governor, should have fired that person. So the bottom line is this. We're going to have this major press conference, and then we're going to walk into the federal court, and we're going to file this multi-million-dollar lawsuit, not just seeking money, but seeking equipment, seeking facilities, seeking programs, and making Cheyney the institution that it always could have and should have been. Thank you very much. one of the things I do want to mention before I forget is that we have about 50 petitions that we're asking people to take and photocopy and circulate, and then get them back to us. Heating Cheyney's Call is going to have a table set up outside sometime in the next half hour or so. We're going to have these petitions. We encourage people to get one, make copies, take it to your church, your mosque, your synagogue, whatever, and circulate it. The other thing is, and this is very important, we have about 50 or 60 of the petitions, but most important, we have today 1,000 copies of this flyer. And this one-page flyer basically tells you in just 3 or 4 paragraphs everything I just spent 15, 20 minutes talking about. So in the next half hour or so, outside on the Heating Cheyney's Call table, there's going to be a big blue and white banner. There's going to be about 50 or 60 petitions and about 1,000 of these flyers, and we hope that you circulate them, and most important, that you join Heating Cheyney's Call. And the way you join is simply contacting us on our Facebook page, contacting us via Twitter, contacting us by our website, contacting us on our office number. All our contact information is here. And I believe there are a few questions, yes.
Do you have to be from Pennsylvania to sign the petition?
Good question. The answer is no. We've been asked that question, and also, do you have to be an adult to sign it? No. Babies and foreigners and Martians, anybody can sign it. Yes.
Great job what you're doing on the team. I just want to know if, and not if, but when the press conference comes, what type of announcement will be out and others can attend?
Great question. I'm glad you asked that. We didn't want to show our hand to the governor's people yet, and we figured that they'll get access to these flyers very soon. So what we say is that we say that Heating Cheyney's Call is compelled to immediately file a major civil rights lawsuit and hold a press conference regarding it at the same time, at least a week or more before the November 4 election. And in response to your question, details regarding the date, time, and location will be announced shortly. So I'm going to make sure that everybody here today gets this flyer, and then everybody will call us or email us or contact us on Facebook, and now we can notify them. So information and details about the press conference will be shared shortly, but we can't say it publicly yet because we don't want the government to know yet. Those who know don't say, and those who say don't know. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you all very much.
Moved by Zero Porter.
I should have known you when he came.
Second by Al Coleman. Any unreadiness? Hearing none, all in favor, raise your hand.